So, good evening, everyone. Those who braved the wet weather to come and join us this evening, and also good evening to those who are joining us online. So we shall begin with the preliminary homage on page 19 in English, followed by the reflections on universal well-being on page 41. Better. Okay. To the Blessed One, the Lord who fully attained perfect enlightenment, to the teaching which he expounded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, to these, the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and Blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Now let us pay preliminary homage to the Buddha. Homage to the Blessed, Noble and Perfectly Enlightened One. Homage to the Blessed, Noble and Perfectly Enlightened One. Homage to the Blessed, Noble and Perfectly Enlightened One. Oh, page 41. Now let us chant the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. The future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be theirs. So, and this morning in the beginning of the group practice, I read from this teachings of the Buddha about the gold refiner. And I find it quite a nice way of the Buddha related to the refining of gold to the refining of the heart and mind. In terms of, like when gold has impurities, you can't do much with it. In terms of, one thing, it doesn't shine, and it's brittle, and you can't mould it into ornaments or shapes. But, if the skilled goldsmith takes out the impurities from the gross to the subtle, then, the gold can be, now for one thing, it becomes shining, bright. And also now it can be moulded into any shape. It's not brittle anymore, it's malleable. And the Buddha relates that to the mind. When the mind has impurities, then we're limited what one can do with the mind. But if do this practice of purifying the mind, then it becomes something that can be put to wonderful things. Becomes something that's bright, malleable, and a source of, wisdom, joy. So in the practice of bhavana is to develop that skill of removing the impurities. In terms of the gross impurities, like the Buddha talked about, stones in the gold, and the Buddha related this to unwholesome conduct with body, speech, and mind. So, in the Buddha's way of teaching, we have the guidelines, the precepts for actions of body and speech. But again, where meditation comes in, it's that awareness of, when an unwholesome tendency arises in the mind, we can actually learn to watch it, to be aware of it, not to act or speak on it. And meditation is to enhance that ability to be more aware when unskillfulness arises. And in meditation, we have to watch the different thoughts and moods that are manifesting in the present moment. But, we're learning how to more observe them. Like, maybe we have the impulse in a period of meditation to get up and walk out, but we don't follow it. So we can observe an impulse. We can maybe observe an impulse to say something, but we, just observe that. So to be able to more realize, we don't have to follow certain habits. So for one thing, we learn the skill of, the thoughts that come into our mind don't have to come out of our mouth. And that's a very, very useful skill to develop. And, how much when, it's what the thought has come out as words before we could, be aware of it, how much that's caused, regret in ourselves and upset to others. So this is why meditation is also, besides benefiting us, it benefits the people around us, because we're more skillful with our actions of body and speech. We might have, an impulse to harm somebody, but again, we can observe that. So even though meditation can be having to sit there with, certain mind states and thoughts going on, just the ability to be aware of them. Realize, the thoughts that come into our mind don't have to come out of our mouth. And that's a very helpful skill to develop, both for oneself and for the people we associate with. So this is the most gross, things in the mind. But then, the Buddha then talks about more subtleties. So it goes into talking about, letting go of thoughts of, sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of harming. So being aware of these sort of thoughts as they arise, and not seeing them as evil or we're bad for having them, but just knowing that if we're inclining towards the higher mind and purity of mind, then these things, we have to abandon them. So this is the skill of developing like a meditation object, like the breath or a skillful contemplation, something we can turn to when our mind's getting into thoughts that are not really conducive towards purifying the heart. And that's something we have to cultivate. And when we talk about thoughts of ill will and thoughts of harming, it's not just about ill will towards others, harming others, it can also be towards ourselves. Self-criticalness, being hard on ourselves, wanting to punish ourselves, whatever. So, being aware of these tendencies. So, it's inclining more towards how we chanted tonight. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from ill will. So that's our aspiration. And that's good to remind ourselves about that. This is our wholesome karma, our wholesome aspiration. So we train ourselves maybe in a meditation object, the breath, the body, the contemplation, just to learn how to keep our awareness more in the present moment. And something we can turn to if our thoughts go into something that's not skillful. And we develop meditation this way. And this, we develop the skill of abandoning certain, unwholesome thoughts. next more subtle impurity the Buddha talked about in this sutta is, like thoughts about relatives, thoughts about the country, thoughts about our reputation. And more subtle because they're not bad thoughts, but one has to understand where is it coming from. Because this can be like the manifestation of anxiety, restlessness, worry. And these are defilements of the mind. So the thoughts themselves are not, bad, but the underlying mind state, is a defilement. Takes our thoughts off in time, worries, anxieties, restlessness. So abandoning these thoughts. And, we do care for our families, our country, our reputation. But how to consider these things with a mind free from worry and anxiety. And to realize the mind that's free from these things. Then maybe we can contemplate these things more skillfully, with wisdom. So we all have relatives who are going through difficult times, and then the country, wars and global warming, the economy, reputation, what do people think of us? So just being aware of these, these sort of thoughts, being aware of the underlying mind state behind them. Again, for this, with meditation, not following these thoughts, we're coming back to, our meditation object. They help us to abandon these mind states, keep us in the present moment. Because anxiety, worry, it's all about time, isn't it? What might happen. So when the goldsmith has removed all the grit down to the subtle fine sand, then to perfect the gold, sometimes he has to heat it up, sometimes has to cool it down, and sometimes just to observe it. And a skilled goldsmith knows how to apply these things. So in the same way, meditation, sometimes to give attention to the sign of calm and concentration, sometimes to the sign of building up energy, effort, and sometimes just to observe with equanimity. This is a skill we have to develop. It's not just like a meditation, it's not just a sort of just slogging away at something, but really knowing what's needed in the present moment with what we're experiencing. So maybe for a lot of people initially it is about calming the mind, and tendency a lot of thoughts and different things. Our mind's conditioned to think a lot. So a lot of initially is maybe giving attention to the sign of calming, concentration. But then, if that's all we practice and the mind does become calm, but then what can happen is the mind can sink into a sort of lethargy. We like the calm, the peace, and then the mind can slip into sort of more dull states, blanking off. Tends towards lethargy. So then we have to apply more effort and energy, maybe to bring up a contemplation, something to bring energy into the mind, a bit more effort. But then, too much effort leads to a restless mind. So we have to know when the mind's getting restless again. So it's finding that balance between concentration and energy. When to calm, when to energize. So this is a skill we develop through practice, through experience. So if we find ourselves falling asleep, then we have to bring up energy. Then sometimes, we work at our meditation object, but sometimes we feel, again a bit, mentally a bit tight, a bit tense. So maybe to relax a bit and just watch the mind with equanimity. Just watch the flow of thoughts arising and ceasing. Rather than the effort to try and focus on anything in particular. But again, being more aware of the thoughts that arise and cease in the present moment. Maybe noticing the silence between the thoughts. So we get a sense of the flow of observing things that arise and ceasing in the present moment, rather than getting carried away with the thoughts. But of course, if the Buddha said if we do just practice equanimity all the time, then the mind won't reach a sort of poise where it can, see clearly into the Dhamma. Saying the mind won't be perfectly poised for the abandoning of the defilements. So the Buddha teaches that, the mind in essence is actually pure gold. But because of these accumulation of defilements, that pure gold has been, glossed over. So the practice is to come back to, this original purity, the original radiance of the pure heart. So I thought we could finish with the chant on page 46, the highest blessings in English. Now let us chant the verses on the highest blessings. Thus have I heard that the Blessed One was staying at Savatthi, residing at the Chithurst Grove, in Attapindika's park. Then in the dark of the night, a radiant Deva illuminated all Chithurst Grove. She bowed down low before the Blessed One. Then standing to one side she said, Devas are concerned for happiness and ever long for peace. The same is true for humankind. What then are the highest blessings? Avoiding those of foolish ways, associating with the wise, and honouring those worthy of honour. These are the highest blessings. Living in places of suitable kinds, with the fruits of past good deeds, and guided by the rightful way. These are the highest blessings. Accomplished in learning and craftsman skills, with discipline highly trained, and speech that is true and pleasant to hear. These are the highest blessings. Providing for mother and father support, and cherishing family, and ways of work that harm no being. These are the highest blessings. Generosity and a righteous life, offering help to relatives and kin, and acting in ways that leave no blame. These are the highest blessings. Steadfast in restraint and shunning evil ways, avoiding intoxicants that dull the mind, and heedfulness in all things that arise. These are the highest blessings. Respectfulness and being of humble ways, contentment and gratitude, and hearing the Dhamma frequently taught. These are the highest blessings.
patience and willingness to accept one's faults, seeing venerated seekers of the truth, and sharing often the words of Dhamma. These are the highest blessings, ardent committed to the holy life, seeing for oneself the noble truths, and the realization of Nibbana. These are the highest blessings. Although in contact with the world, unshaken the mind remains, beyond all sorrow, spotless, secure. These are the highest blessings. They who live by following this path know victory wherever they go, and every place for them is safe. These are the highest blessings.
So, finish with the closing homage in English on page 29.
The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. The teaching, so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples, who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha.
So good night to everyone who are in here or online, and wish you all a peaceful rest of the evening.